All right, Comeback team community, welcome to the Comeback podcast. Here we are in our Park City episodes and sitting here in Park City, Utah. It's evening, got a beautiful snowfall. We're extremely comfortable, which brings up exactly what we want to talk about in this podcast. You know, are you capable of being uncomfortable? Are you uncomfortable being uncomfortable? How do you approach that? Do you think about that at all? Or do you just listen to your emotional response instinctively, and if you get uncomfortable, do you back out? This episode is going to focus on the art of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and how to play that into your preparation, into your comeback, into your winter sports planning, into your execution, and hopefully your injury avoidance, and ultimately, maximum productive joy as you pursue it. So as we think about that, and you look at discomfort in whatever activity you're choosing, particularly, in this climate in winter sports, is it the climate? Is it the cold? Depending on where you're coming from. Is it the altitude? Is it the fear of injury? Is it the injury you currently have that's silent, that you're worried you're going to wake up? Is it just lack of preparation? Ultimately, the most common thing that I think everybody ends up dealing with is lack of physical confidence. And there are a whole bunch of things that you can do to improve your physical confidence. And we're really going to focus on that with this. And, and I know, Chuck, as it relates to preparation physically, that has so much to do with your comfort zone. If you're not prepared, if you're not agile, if you're not in balance, it's inherently going to make you fearful without even really realizing why, especially if you're doing a balance sport.
Well, out here, as an example, you better not think what's going on, because if you think, the action's already by you and you're setting yourself up for failure. So you have to be reactive. How do you be reactive? It's by practicing. But you have to practice things that are your weakest link, and that's getting into your discomfort. Right. So when you perfect that, through repetition, through slow movement first, as we stated earlier, owning the movement, and then you speed it up. Not only does the musculoskeletal system adapt, but studies have shown that the brain's neuroplasticity changes the brain, which is going to allow you to expand your capabilities. So we have to go through that discomfort to become comfortable.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about this, and I get a chance to work with very high-level athletes across the globe, but I also get a chance to work with beginner athletes. I also work with people that may be brilliant at what they do, but they know that there's something more that they need, that they're searching for. And that's how you can identify people with very high levels of excellence, because they say, listen, okay, maybe I'm pretty good at this, but I know that there's more. I know I have more to offer. I had one of my athletes come to me and said, he's a Major League Baseball pitcher, and that we all know pretty well. And he said, TA, I'm coming to see you. I said, okay, well, come on over. I said, you sound pretty fired up. He said, I am. He said, because you know what? The more I see your stuff, the more I see you doing athletic things with your people, and it looks like you have something that's athletic over there for me to do, because I got to improve my athleticism. I can throw strikes all day, but I need to be more athletic. I want to be able to dunk. I want to be able to do stuff that other athletes do, not just be a great pitcher. And I think that speaks to a mindset, of preparation that we talked about before too. But when you start talking about being comfortable, the first thing they say, and it almost sounds cliche, like, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. I think that, the first step is put yourself in a position to be uncomfortable. You have to be willing. When we talk about commitment to participation, you have to commit to also putting yourself in uncomfortable positions, because we know that once we push that level to a certain point, our body demands adaptation, right? It demands that adaptation. So we add that stress, we add that discomfort so that we can put ourselves in a position to start to improve. That begins the process. But once we start learning and get a little bit more understanding of how to press our buttons the right way, or press our athletes' buttons the right way to create that lack of comfortability, then we have to teach people, and even ourselves, to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Now, that's the cliche that most people hear about. Oh, got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. But if you really truly break that down, It's saying that I am willing to continue to put myself in a position that demands a response from my body, from the neuro side, from the physical, structural side, from the emotional side. Once you make that commitment, I had to commit to get out there on those skis when I'd never skied before. I had to commit to put myself in an uncomfortable position. But then there was a conversation that you and I were having, Coach, and it brings me to the third and most dynamic level that I think that a lot of people haven't really thought about. Coach, you said to me as you came in, changed clothes, put all your ski clothes on, I said, where are you going? You said, I'm going up to 99.90. I'm going to the top. I got to take this run a couple times. He said, I got to go make myself uncomfortable. And I said, really? He said, you know what, if I don't, he said, I get uncomfortable being comfortable. I said, whoa. I leaned up. I said, hold on a second here. I said, so what you're saying is, the first step is finding a way to be uncomfortable. Second step is being comfortable being uncomfortable. And the third step is once you finally start to achieve a high level of mastery in whatever your activity is, skiing just being one of those activities, if you get really comfortable, right, sometimes you're okay with that. And that's a mindset that we want to avoid because that's when things start getting stagnant and we stop changing. But we should be in the mindset where we're just really, it doesn't sit well with us to be comfortable. We got to consistently find that next opportunity to make ourselves better. And nobody does it better than you. Tell me, share with us, and share with the podcast, some of your best techniques that you use, regardless of the sport. Winter sports is a very good example of how you create levels of safe yet uncomfortable situations to continue to make progress.
Yeah, I think the starting point is getting to the point where you really understand the value of being uncomfortable. And the value is that's where your growth comes. If you are completely comfortable, everyone talks about muscle memory, right? And so for me, when I look back, my 40s were all about muscle memory. And in an old podcast, and you guys know personally for a while, that's when I started getting hurt. That's when body parts started breaking or straining. Or needing surgery. And it wasn't because I had lost capability. It wasn't because I had lost things learned. It was because I wasn't stretching my body, my mindset, my speed, my agility. I was comfortable in everything I was doing. Yeah. And I had hit a certain standard. And whatever your standard is, whatever your level is, it's really easy with our busy, crazy lives to just accept, well, I worked out today, or I did my aerobic, I did my low impact, I did my stretching, I did, I played full court basketball. You feel good about yourself, great to be out there, great for the social, for the anxiety, for the release. But at the end of the day, did you stress yourself? Stress is critical to growth and preparation. And, so when you ask me, how do you avoid pushing too far? That's a trickier question. I personally think if you do it proactively, in a controlled way, knowing that your intent is to create stress, it's in a controlled environment. And personally, I've experienced that. So whether it's luck of the draw and I haven't proven myself wrong yet, or it turns out, I believe the process of presenting stress, creating stress, of chasing stress, creates an environment that I'm already tuned into. I'm already anticipating that I'm going to be stressed, so I'm ready physically, emotionally, mentally, and I know I'm already anticipating what stresses I'm going to feel. When that stress comes to you unexpectedly, unprepared, and muscle memory style, that's when you get hurt.
What I find interesting is not only what you said earlier, is the body has to go under stress to grow. And we know that. We have to stress the organism for it to get stronger. Knowing you now for 15, 16 years, I remember you going through that when you were in your 40s.
Absolutely.
But what I find interesting, and there's a question I have for you, is since you've changed your style of training and you stress yourself, and you've even said to me, you at times put things out there so you have to go do it. But how much did that stress not only affect you physically, how much did it affect you mentally? But here's the bottom root of the question is, knowing when you changed And knowing what you've shared with me through your practice and your business, how much did one of those spur on the other? Yeah. And how interrelated were those?
They all spurred it on, and hanging around you guys and watching you and listening to you and stubbornly not doing as you said, but absorbing it in my own way into everything that I did. I was mindful enough. I was searching for better. I realized I was getting hurt. That realization that I was getting hurt more often, personally, as my kids were getting to peak teenage years, where all of a sudden my biggest goal structure in my personal life was doing incredibly cool things with my kids. And all of a sudden I was starting to get hurt in an accelerated way. And I did a deep, long soul search about, okay, well, I'm clearly on the wrong trajectory. I'm not ready to call myself dated. I still have goals with my family. I still have goals with my kids. So it started with questions, not with answers. And each of those events gave me different questions. And I started going through the process and in little sequence of events, I started reflecting on how I was as a young athlete and up until college football. And I wasn't doing any of the things I did to prepare for my sports. I was 100% relying on know-how, technical expertise, and things I was already good at, and muscle memory. And it was a setup for hurt at the level I was playing in whatever it is I was doing. So I've absorbed everything you guys said. I took it a step further because every single day I deal with people that have severely broken their spine. Right. And you start to assimilate all the stories. And I'm so about the compelling stories of injury and recovery, and most importantly, extreme recovery. And so that was the pathway.
What's interesting on some of those concepts you talk about of muscle memory, many of the clients and patients I've worked with, particularly as they've gotten older and they've had just some overuse injuries, they've for so many years worked on muscle memory. Their training, their exercise was doing the same thing, maybe changing a few exercises, but it was pretty much the same thing on muscle memory. And they were starting to become injured. That's where the variability comes into play, and not only changing up an exercise, but changing up the movement pattern so the stress level is different. And one of the things they kept saying to me on numerous occasions, I don't do this well. I'm uncomfortable doing this. I don't like doing it. Why do you not like doing it? Because it doesn't feel right. Well, we're putting them into a different zone now or a different comfort level. It's interesting that we slow it down, have them start to own the movement, they start getting better with it, they start doing it with more efficiency, and that discomfort becomes a little bit more comfortable, so we just keep raising that bar or changing that threshold, and they keep becoming uncomfortable, but all along the way they're getting healthier, right. They feel better about themselves, they're stronger, and I see that more as we get older. Being the senior of our group, so to speak, chronologically anyway, so much of what I used to do on muscle memory, it's not feeling good anymore, and it's making me feel uncomfortable. So some of the things I have to do is not only change some of the movements, I have to change the load of it, meaning how much volume I put, how much weight, how many repetitions, how many sets, but I'm also doing it shorter. In one respect, that's making me feel uncomfortable because I'm still of the mindset of what it used to be. Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, I'm feeling better because I'm not loading myself like I did through the muscle memory, but I'm loading myself in a different way, right. And I'm able to feel a little bit more efficient.
But I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, we talk about the terminology muscle memory is pretty widely accepted terminology, but what we're really talking about is neuromuscular, like control and coordination, right? So our ability to, and it's so funny how it comes back full circle because yes, we're working the musculature, but when you start talking about movement patterns, it's not about the quad being strong and the calf being strong. It's about our ability to put those muscle systems together to create movement systems that are connecting with a neurological pathway that is facilitating great movement and understanding. And then we get back into the proprioception, the things that we talked about before. So you have strong components, right, that are fueled by a strong connection, right, that are done over time to create that, the myelin that are surrounding and insulating those neural pathways and whatnot to be able to create a reinforced movement pattern that the body and brain understands that it can start relying upon as instinct, as opposed to just a movement that is randomly done. And go ahead, Chuck.
What we also have to do, though, is keep in mind, particularly for people who have been exercising for a long time or are in the field, is that we don't want to keep doing it in the same pattern every day.
Right.
Well, listening to what you both said, it reminds me very clearly of a phase I went through where I realized that the way I was working out, even when I did work out, was very two-dimensional. And you both kind of alluded to it right now. And you can both tell me, if I was thinking it correctly or not. But when you said diversify standard patterns of movement so that it's a little bit eccentric, a little bit different, I got to a point where I realized I wasn't three-dimensionally gifted anymore. I was two-dimensionally gifted. I anterior posterior plane, side and side, but I wasn't completely versatily three-dimensionally mobile, strong, agile, proprioceptive. People underestimate the value of reflex pathways. What is the value of a reflex pathway? It's protective. Yeah. It's nature's gift. It's our security system. Right. If you don't stress your reflex pathway, from a neuroplasticity standpoint, from a myelinated nerve, you have basically turned off your electric fence.
That's right.
And so being comfortable in an exercise pattern that's very two-dimensional, that's very repetitive and not very versatile, I felt like I had lost all of my agility reflex mechanisms for the unexpected movement in a dynamic event.
Right.
You're an avid tennis player, okay, high-level tennis player. Think of that two-dimensional training. How did that, or how would that affect your training and your performance on the court now?
Yeah, there's no way I could play at my current level with my 40s preparation.
And you said it's the forward and back, the anterior, posterior, and the lateral. But what's our most powerful plane of motion? Rotation. You're not going to hit a tennis ball like this. I'm not going to throw a baseball like this. If you're going to come after me, I'm not going to hit you like this, but I'm going to load and try and take it through rotation, which is the plane of motion that most people don't do.
Not only do most people not do it, that's where the easiest place for people to get injured. So there are a lot of really great exercise programs out there, but some of the most famous exercise programs out there right now are unbelievably void of anything that has to do with transverse plane or rotation. And it's like, man, once you start building on volume and building on volume and building, and then once you get under fatigue, and then you start some sort of a rotational, motion or something that the body's not prepared for because it's already under fatigue, that's when we get those back injuries and those tweaks and those strains. And then we start to create these compensatory patterns to try to avoid these strains, and then we end up in a really bad place. Chuck, that's why I send people to you, the biomechanist, because I say, hey, Chuck, I need a gait and motion analysis here. I need to know what it is. What are they lacking here? What do you find to be the most common?
Well, what's interesting, again, most of the compensatory patterns are forward and back, or in the sagittal plane, or side to side in the frontal plane. Those two movements are decelerating against gravity. But when we go into rotation, gravity has very little impact on it. It's pure muscle function, pure myofascial tissue that has to eccentrically load. It goes back to deceleration again to stop and go the opposite way. But what we have to be careful of is where that motion comes from. And I've been beating it into people for years. The big movement rocks: foot and ankle, hips, thoracic spine. The rotation needs to come through there. If it doesn't, that's where we start to see these injuries. So when you mention that the athlete's tired from going in the two planes of motion, and then they start rotating, it takes pure muscle and myofascial function to decelerate it, and we're tired and we can't control it, because most injuries are deceleration injuries.
And what we see too is that once we get over that hump, that speed bump, and people start to understand, I need to train my body in a multiplanar environment, right? And I need to not only do sagittal plane, frontal plane, transverse, but how I integrate those planes. You do a great job in your exercise programs that I've always seen by working in that multiplanar environment. But what it does is, what is it at the end of the day, what does it do? When somebody knows that they can move confidently forward and back, confidently side to side, they start to really get an awareness and a confidence that they can go out and play that game of tennis without injuring themselves. They can go out and get on that ski slope and not be so subject to injury. Once you have that confidence, you can start to attack. I just want to share one quick little story, and it's not a winter sport, but the water was cold. I had an opportunity to get out with Randy Hetrick, the owner and creator of TRX, and our TRX master instructor cadre a few years back out in San Diego. And Randy was a Navy SEAL commander. He was a commander of SEAL Team 6, which is, we know, is a very elite fighting force here, in America. And Randy brought us all out to San Diego to do log PT. If anybody knows what that's all about, it's 400-pound logs, 500-pound logs. You have 5 to 6 people on each log, and you go through a very regimented set of directions and instructions to lift the log, set the log down. You squat, you overhead squat, you overhead press it, you do overhead, you do everything. You do rotation, you do linear, lateral.